nice to meet you all. So I don't know if everyone knows Trinity Centre, but we are a community arts centre based in Bristol, and the building is a converted kind of former Grade 2 star listed church, and we've run a project over the last sort of decade to renovate that building, and we run it as a community arts centre for youth arts and sort of education purposes. That's not the building that I'm talking about today. So the building that we have received COF support for is a building called Jacob's Wells Baths. I don't know if it's helpful for me to share my screen. I can share a picture of the building if that's helpful.
Right, yeah.
So I'm just going to share my screen now. This is when the tech knowledge starts to fail. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully you can see my pictures. So the Trinity is, as I said, a community arts centre based in Bristol. We've delivered a bunch of repairs on that building, and obviously there's still work to do. It's an old building, it's never going to be finished. But at the start of last year, we started a campaign to save Jacob's Wells Baths. We're working with a community hub group who are based in the locality, and for people who don't know Bristol, it's there's a lot of sort of historic buildings that are repurposed for a bunch of community use. And this building served as a dance centre for 30 years. It was formerly a swimming pool, and until it closed as a dance centre towards the end of 2016, due to kind of disrepair and sort of lack of general maintenance over time. And sort of various ideas happened about the building to kind of bring it back into use. These projects sort of never got off the ground. And at the beginning of 2023, the council will sort of announce that they were going to dispose of the building. And so then it came under threat of sort of disposal, potential conversion into sort of private accommodation. And so the community sort of started a campaign that Trinity backed as a kind of trusted asset guardian. We supported and worked with them to lead the campaign and lead the application to Community Ownership Fund to secure the funds to try and bring it back into use as a youth, arts, community and education hub. There's a lot of need within the locality. So even though it's in a part of Bristol that people tend to think of as quite affluent, the building sits between two kind of big social housing blocks. There's a number of kind of sort of high deprivation sort of localities within the community, such as a lot of older people living in isolation, lots of sort of transient communities. There's a number of young people who are based within the locality, don't actually have access to any youth provision within the area. And it's something that our partners, Young Bristol, are hoping to work with us when we get the building back up and running so that they can deliver open access youth provision from the space. So it really is a kind of an effort of many parts, lots of community stakeholders and cultural and voluntary sector organisations have been involved to help us pull together the business plan and the application. And we also worked with a really strong professional team, both giving sort of pro bono early support and then sort of support throughout the development phase to make sure, as Debbie was saying, that we understood the cost of the programme. And so what we've done is sort of create a sort of phased approach to the repairs, whereby the first phase that COF is supporting will be to essentially get the building back up and safe and ready to use. So sort of fixing the roof, giving us a sort of fighting chance to get us back into the building, start to engage groups in the space. And then we'll look to do some further consultation with the community once they're back in the building so that we can kind of define more clearly a programme of kind of improvement works that can help us to get the maximum use out of the space. So this is just a bit of an idea about how we're sort of then splitting that funding. So we've got the funds secured from Community Ownership Fund, as well as £400,000 confirmed Trust and Foundation match. There's some applications still in progress due for decision sort of by June. And so again, what we're going to be doing with this first phase as well is splitting the phase into a phase. So we'll be commencing some works around the sort of opening up and sort of site clearance and stabilization work. So we'll be kind of delivering that. And then we'll be moving on to later part of the year onto the kind of more internal works, putting the roof back on and sorting out the kind of fixtures and fittings inside, like making sure there's a floor and all of those things. And we're aiming to complete the COF spend by December 23. The phase 1 works with a full relaunch in summer 2025. And then phase 2 works will begin in 2025 and carry on probably till the end of 2026. And that will be, like I said, again, looking at how we can make some improvements, how we can commercialize some of the areas of the space so that we can make sure that it has a viable future. We did a lot of engagement, community engagement with stakeholders. The initial petition was signed kind of off the back of a Hot Wells and Harbourside Community Association petition. So they sort of were really pivotal in helping us to understand local need. And we really worked hard to get kind of lots of support online, like I said, both from community organisations, but our local MP, local councillors are super supportive as well. So it really is just one of those buildings that people feel really strongly about. And, you know, it's really what the purpose of Community Ownership Fund is for, is like, if you lose a building like this, you'll never get it back. But if we can save it, if we can give it a fighting chance through this investment, then we can hopefully create a really vibrant community art space, a bit like Trinity, but slightly less music and slightly more dance. So I just put a few key learnings here, and I'm just wanting to get to questions really, if anyone's got any questions. But as Debbie was saying, like, a lot of this is about articulating impact, really showing like the grants officers who are reading your application that this is a really important building for you and your community, and how the investment from COF is really going to make that impact to giving lasting communities infrastructure for people who need that. Get your applications in early. So what I kind of mean by that is like your applications for, like, as Debbie was saying, your planning consents and any other kind of applications that you might need, as well as your match applications, because all of the decisions end up taking a lot longer than you think, and you want to try and align everything to give yourself as much time as possible to get your project completed. Building strong relationships. So as I sort of mentioned, your community stakeholders are super important, as well as your political stakeholders, and making use of that pro bono advice. So like Debbie was saying, if you've got to get your costs accurate, rather than just saying, right, we want to renovate this room, is sort of working with like local QS, local architect firms, to see if they can give you some more indicative costs, more accurate costs of the work that needs to happen early on, rather than just kind of putting your finger in the air and guessing those numbers. And really it's for you to invest in the time to understand the detail of your own project. So understanding the risks, but understanding the kind of value of the project will help you create a stronger application. My don'ts are just like, you know, a kind of mirror of that, really, making sure that you don't underestimate how long and how often you need to regularly communicate with your stakeholders. Try to avoid paying for what you can do yourself. So why it is important to buy in that expert knowledge for things like architect teams and QS. You know, there aren't really any shortcuts to that kind of community engagement. It is really for you as your community association or group to make sure that you hold those relationships. And try not to let great be the enemy of good. So rather than dreaming up a £20 million capital scheme that you might never raise the money for, what is it that you really need to do now in order to create a safe, usable building that people love? And I don't know if people know Trinity Centre, but it's very rough around the edges. Its charm is in its heritage, and we try and make the most use of that in order to give the community access to a usable, functional, flexible community space. It doesn't need to have loads of moving parts and shiny things. It just needs to be somewhere warm, safe for people to come and make their own ideas happen. Try to remember that capital projects aren't always linear, and sometimes things can take a little bit longer than planned. So it'd be lovely if everything just moved really slowly. You know, you got this and then you got this, and sometimes the things don't always go in that order. So you have to just kind of flex around that. And your building will likely never be finished. So embrace imperfection. Like, because I'm still doing, like I said, loads of work on Trinity Centre. There'll always be work to do. But you can still make really great spaces for your community if you've got a little bit of support from funders like COF and all of your support from your community and political stakeholders.